Welcome back to Geography Year 7. Today we are on lesson 5 of our Ice on the Land topic, and we are going to be looking at some features called hanging valleys. So we are going to start by recapping how glaciers erode the landscape. Then we will look at how this erosion creates a hanging valley and what happens to a hanging valley at the end of an ice age. Before you watch the rest of this video, can you please make sure that you have completed the spelling test that is attached as a separate activity on Show My Homework? There are 10 words and you can attempt this spelling test up to 3 times. Make sure you listen to how the words are said and read the explanation of what the word means underneath before you have a go at the test. Make sure it's your best possible attempt because your teachers will be recording the score that you get. Okay, so a hanging valley then is one of the more complicated features to explain, but they're not too complicated. So a hanging valley, you have to imagine that you have got your main U-shaped valley that we were talking about in our last lesson, that big, wide, flat-bottomed valley which has been carved out by a massive glacier. Now you have this main glacier and this main valley, but also on the sides of it, where you have your steep sides, you also have smaller glaciers and smaller valleys, and these are called tributary glaciers, little baby glaciers. And because these glaciers are much smaller and they don't have as much ice, they aren't as powerful. They don't have as much energy and power to be able to erode through abrasion, the scraping away, and plucking, the picking away of rocks from the area around it. So because it's only small, it only carves out a really small channel high up in the side of the main valley. Now, when the ice melts at the end of an ice age, or if you get a slightly warmer period in your ice age, this ice will completely melt away, but it will leave usually something called a misfit stream. So it leaves just a little tiny river flowing in the bottom of a big valley. And where you have a misfit stream up in one of these hanging valleys, up in the side of your main rock wall here, this will flow as a little river and then it will flow over the edge and into the main valley as a waterfall, and they look really spectacular. Here's a really nice example of where you can see a hanging valley with a waterfall in it. So this hanging valley would have been a small glacier that eroded a, a fairly large channel across and downwards. And eventually, this little valley, which would have been filled with a smaller glacier called a tributary glacier, would have joined into this main, massive, wide, and flat valley here. And you can see that now that the ice is gone, you have got a misfit river which flows into a waterfall, which really spectacularly flows over the edge there and into the main valley. And this is in Yosemite National Park in California, so it's well worth taking a look at Google Earth to have a look around this area a bit more. Now, just to show you the differences between a valley that has been eroded by a river and a valley that's been eroded by a glacier, as we talked about last lesson, here is, they're not quite before and after pictures because they are different valleys. Obviously, we would never be around to be able to take photos of a valley before and after a glacier because they're around for hundreds of thousands of years. But in the one on the left here, you can see that we have got a really narrow valley. And that's because the thing that cut it out, the thing that eroded it, was really small and really narrow. So that river would have had to wind around all of the mountains that were there and wiggle its way through the path of least resistance. And it creates these things called interlocking spurs, which we talked about in our rivers topic. By the time we get to our valley when it's been filled with a glacier, The glacier doesn't have to wind around all of the edges of the mountains. It is massive and it is powerful, and it will just bulldoze through and cut through the entire valley and cut off everything that's in its way. So we have this much wider, much deeper valley called a U-shaped valley because it's shaped like a U, not a V. And in the bottom, you might have a misfit stream, like you can see in the bottom of this one here, just about. We have truncated spurs, where those interlocking or kind of zipping together bits have just been sliced off by the much more powerful glacier. And you would have a hanging valley. We can't see a hanging valley in this one, but as we could see in the one before, you'd have a hanging valley high up in the sides of the mountains, flowing into your main valley. If you want a little bit of extra explanation or maybe to see some video clips, then the BBC Bite-Size website section is really useful for this, and I have linked it on Show My Homework as a separate website link. Your one and only writing task for today, then, Year 7, is to take these sentences which explain how you get a U-shaped valley and a hanging valley, and I would like you to rearrange them into the correct order and copy them out in the correct order. We will put the answers to this on the activity on the lesson for next week so that you can self-mark them. But you need to write out each sentence into the correct order to explain how a U-shaped valley and a hanging valley is formed, please. Keep hold of that work because, as I say, you are going to be marking it next week, and I will see you for next week's lesson.